Hey kids, get in my van!
It's time for comics!
Hello and welcome to the Comic Book Van, and I am the comic book man, Angel Hernandez. I just wanted to say that this is the second episode that I am recording this week. Initially, this was going to be a follow-up to episode 3. Well, it is a follow-up, but it would be like episode 3.5 or something. But I actually think I got enough things to talk about for a full extra episode this week, and also I didn't even get a chance to get to the comic books I got last week, so pretty soon I'm going to start up with that. I'm going to go right to the comics, and then we got a lot of things to talk about as far as Comic Con goes, because that's going to be happening this weekend, and that is a huge event for comic books, for comic book fans. Last time I took up a little bit too much time talking about the Fantastic Failure that is going to be the new Fantastic Four movie. And one thing that was brought to my attention was that I seem to be all for changing in the comic books, For instance, the new Captain America is going to be Sam Wilson the Falcon, and I'm okay with Thor becoming a girl, or a woman rather. It's definitely a woman, and the new comic books that are going to be coming out. But apparently, I was a little stuck up about the movie universes having differences in them. So I wanted to explain the difference really quick. You see, in comic books, we've already seen just about every story you can imagine played out. I mean, every story that they feel safe enough to show us anyways, without crossing any lines or getting too dark. Sometimes they do, and then they retcon them. Sometimes people die and you think they're going to stay dead, but they come back. So considering that there's at least 50 years of history on some of these characters, and in other cases, like let's say Batman right now this year, he's celebrating his 75th year of existence. Considering there's that much behind them in comic books, I feel like they should be trying to expand their characters in new directions and really take a leap, take a plunge in some of these stories and change the way that things have worked for so long. We're ready for a different kind of comic book. Now, in the movie universe of comic book movies, these stories, these origin stories, not many have been covered actually. And once more, not many have been done well. We've seen Batman quite a few times, but we've never seen the real Batman. The closest that we got was with The Dark Knight. So I'm still eager and looking forward to seeing comic book movies portrayed on the big screen the right way. And in those cases, I do want to see those stories that have been beloved for so long come to life and be an accurate representation of what made us like them in the first place. But in the comic books themselves right now, there's a lot more room and a lot less money on the line should these things happen to not work out. So why not take the risk? Another quick note before I get into the pool list. I watched an anime, and I know this doesn't have anything to do with comic books per se, but I had been thinking lately about maybe having like an anime or manga corner here. I mean, just the slightest, tiniest bit of a corner, just because I consider, like, unlike some people, I don't know if this is a big deal anymore, but I consider anime to just be cartoons. And I consider manga to just be comic books. I don't really see much of a difference, and I enjoy them just the same. Honestly, most of my entertainment, like let's say 99% of the entertainment I enjoy is comic books. The other 1% is like movies and TV, articles, and anime. Saw an anime, I believe it was called Eden of the East, I may be wrong, but the reason I bring it up, it's remarkable, is that everybody watching it with me in the room couldn't help but mention that it kind of looked like a comic book come to life. It has this like 3D animation for the background, but it has like traditional animation on the characters, on the character designs. So I thought that was really cool. And not only that, it's the kind of story that has crossover appeal. It's not in your face. They're not, the characters aren't wacky and zany and yelling at you the whole time. It's a really well thought out, really pleasant on the eyes and on the ears kind of anime. It's also just a charming story. You know what? I found myself like begging for more at the end of it. Like I wish that like I could have went through all the episodes, but then if I had did that, I wouldn't have any more new episodes to watch. So I'm going to take my time and really enjoy, really savor this story. So again, it has crossover appeal. If you enjoy comic books, why don't you give it a try? You might really like it. And yes, I realize that this is very old, but I'm kind of reintroducing myself still into the world of geeky things, and especially comic books. And now I want to talk about my pull list. So I picked up so many comic books that it was really hard to catch up with them, and that's what this podcast is also about. It's about catching up, and especially it's about focusing on comic books, what I neglected to do last time, I will admit, but still I had a good time. So I'm going to talk about Deadpool vs. X-Force #1. In this comic book, Deadpool is traveling back in time. Apparently he goes back to the American Revolution, and he starts assassinating people that he can kill without altering time. So it's pretty funny from the get-go to see him on the front line with other guys holding muskets, and he has a big futuristic gun, and he's in his Deadpool costume. And I guess Cable goes back to try to stop him. I mean, the only thing I would say is that this is definitely for the kind of person who likes the big guns and the big action-y type comic books. Rob Liefeld would approve. Okay. Superman #32 is the first issue with John Romita Jr. On the pencils. You got Jansen on the inks, and you have what's his name? The guy that writes everything in DC Comics. Jeff Johns on writing. What a dream team of talent. It looks amazing. And when again, John Romita Jr.'s artwork is really cool, but it's even better when it's embellished by Klaus Janson. So the story is really fun. At the end of it, there's a surprise character reveal, somebody who's going to be in the ongoing series for the while, I could think, and hopefully somebody that Superman can eventually throw down with. That's what I'm hoping. I read Grayson #1, and let me tell you, Dick Grayson, he's Nightwing. He was Robin to Batman for many, many, many years. In this book, in the New 52, Dick Grayson decides to more or less become like a secret agent. And normally, I hate this kind of stuff, because it's doing exactly what I said that stupid Fantastic Four movie was going to do. It's taking him and putting him in a realistic setting. It's pretty annoying, but I found it actually to be very enjoyable. They know what they're doing over there. My only gripe is a common gripe that I find in comics, and that's that the artwork on the cover does not match the artwork on the inside. Generally speaking, I prefer when the artist who is writing the interiors does the exterior work as well, does the comic book cover, so that you know what you're getting. Most people will look on the shelves, see a really cool cover, be fascinated by it, open it up, and then be disappointed just by the fact that it's different sometimes, and other times it's because the artwork on the inside is atrocious and it needs a good cover to cover up that weakness. This isn't the case with Grayson. It's got great interiors as well, but if that cover artist had done the interiors, it would have been even better. I picked up Original Sin #1. I'm starting to catch up with Marvel Comics' premiere event, the big crossover this year, I suppose. And while I didn't enjoy myself that much, because I've seen these kind of stories played out time and time again, I could see the appeal. But for me, this is one that I would probably rather wait for the trade paperback to come out than to follow it issue by issue. If you didn't know, the whole storyline is that the Watcher is assassinated. And gruesomely, there is a huge Devil Spread page where you see him with his eyes gouged out and a big hole in his head. It's pretty unsettling, to tell you the truth, and it's the kind of shock value that I think they usually go for in these big crossovers. It reminds me of Secret Invasion or Civil War or Dark Avengers stuff that came afterwards, which Dark Avengers was really cool, by the way. If you ever want to read a great comic book, I'm pretty sure it's collected in trade, Dark Avengers is amazing. The Green Goblin turns into the Iron Patriot with Tony Stark's armor. Tony Stark is a fugitive. He brings his own team of Avengers together, but they're all villains. it's probably one of the best things that Marvel has done, like in the last 15 years or so. Okay, let's see. Moving on. I picked up Star Wars number 19. This is a good story. I really enjoy the Star Wars comic books because they expand that universe with familiar characters. So it's a really quick attention getter. It's a real quick grabbing. It grabs your eye really quick, and then you're enjoying yourself because you can read this thing. You're hearing the voices of the actors in your head, so you're like getting an extended movie just by reading it. Otherwise, I had some gripes with the artwork. This person really doesn't know how to detail shadows in particular. He or she is very fond of a shadow technique on the neck that just makes everybody look like they have the neck of an 80-year-old person. I would still highly recommend it. This is probably not a problem that any casual reader would have. Picked up Saga. Didn't get too far into it. It is an attractive looking book. Definitely more in the realm of fantasy, less in the realm of your typical comic book fare. There's a lot of swear words. It's like an adult type book. It's not an adult book, but it's very mature audiences only. I think I'll go into this more depth when I have Stephanie here. Batman and Frankenstein, number 31, together again, I guess at last? I don't know. I just liked it because Frankenstein is holding a gigantic sword and Batman is just right next to him trekking through the snow. It's a good story. Again, another book that I'll probably go through in more detail if we have the time when Stephanie is around. But there's a book on the shelf that's called Batman and Frankenstein. Okay, this one was fun. This is a comic book that got me personally excited. Miss Marvel number 1. Now, at this point, the book's run is at about 7 issues, I believe. But, of course, I went to my local comic book store. Not my local comic book store, but a local comic book store called Corner Store Comics over in Anaheim. And they also run Beach Ball Comics in the same city, I believe. And they had an amazing selection as well. It's hard to knock it. When you go to a comic book store and you buy your comics from there, you're supporting the industry in a big way. Because that's ultimately how this thing makes money and how the machine keeps running, is when you buy comic books from an authorized vendor. Hate to say it, that's the best way to do it. That's the best way to keep this thing going. So I will always be hitting up local comic book stores and picking up books there. Miss Marvel is so cool. Like, this comic book is really awesome. So for those who didn't know, it's an Indian girl who's got the powers of Miss Marvel, I believe. And the story starts off charming enough where, you see people coming in and already you're seeing kind of like what she has to deal with. There's a bit of a stereotyping thing going on that she has to worry about. She lives with a very traditional family, but it doesn't play out like a sob story, and it doesn't play out like it's really trying to hammer in a lesson that you have to learn. It's just a fun-looking book, and I'm so grateful to Marvel Comics. I know I give them a lot of shit, but I'm so grateful for them allowing this comic book to be made. I'm definitely going to go back and find all the back issues. I hope it remains this fun. I hope this character can keep going for a really long time. I picked up the Suicide Squad number 1. I don't know if the official title is New Suicide Squad, but it's New Suicide Squad number 1. For those unfamiliar, it is Slade Wilson, Deathstroke. It is the Joker's daughter. It is, I think his name is the Black Manta or something like that. Harley Quinn and like another villain or two that I'm not familiar with. All on a government-sanctioned team. I guess I don't know what the program is exactly, but they go around doing the killing that real superheroes wouldn't do. What can you expect from a book like that? Again, Rob Liefeld would definitely approve. He's all for the action and the big guns and, that kind of stuff. If you're into that kind of things, you'll like this book. It wasn't spectacular. It didn't blow my mind, but it was good. I'm still following Nightcrawler and the X-Men up to issue number 3. Again, it's a very serviceable story. I enjoyed it very much, and I enjoy reading it with Stephanie, being that Nightcrawler is her favorite character. Deadly Class number 1 from Image Comics. Deadly Class is another comic book that knocked my socks off this week. It follows the story of a kid who grows up homeless. And you see a couple time leaps as he gets older, but you see all the things he has to deal with. And a lot of it is this inner monologue about the pain he's going through. It's really well written. Like, the dialogue is the best part about this book, because it's so strong and it's so authentic feeling, as to where you might think that the author grew up this way. Of course, it's Rick Remender who's the author, and I don't believe that he did grow up this way. He's an excellent author, by the way. He works for Marvel Comics, but apparently, Image Comics is turning into a great place to be if you're a creator and you want to own the work that you're making. So, the most variety on the shelf right now you're getting from Image Comics, to be sure. Okay, real quick, I want to just talk about 2 more comic books here. Supergirl number 33. There is an appearance by Gen 13 at the end of it. If you're not familiar with them, they were a guys comic book team in the 90s. And by guys, I mean there was a lot of TNA in there. But they looked pretty cool in this. And not only that, this Supergirl book is probably like one of the most attractive ones I picked up this week. It's just a really, really well-drawn book. Like, the inks, the colors, they really pop. The story, again, self-contained. It's like the first comic book I picked up in the run. But I didn't have any trouble following along. And I'll always give praise when I see that kind of work. Highly recommend Supergirl number 33. She's a Red Lantern this whole time, apparently. And Red Lanterns are part of the Lantern Corps. There's Red Lanterns, Yellow Lanterns, Green Lanterns. I don't know if they're all made their appearance yet in the New 52, but this was a big thing in the DC Universe right before they did the reboot. And apparently she's a Red Lantern. There is a change in this, and you get to see her in the original Supergirl costume. And when that page turns and you see her back in her full costume, it's just a stunning visual. The other comic book I picked up is Teen Titans number 1. And this is a well-written comic book, but with a poor choice of artists. Now, Kenneth Rocafort is the artist, and he works pretty well on some books. But in this particular story, he is the weak point of it all. For instance, Raven's costume is just hideous. It's by far one of the worst designs I've ever seen on a character. I don't buy it. It's hokey. It's just gaudy looking. And I hope they change it soon. There's 2 covers to this book, and if you see the Kenneth Rocafort cover and you compare it to the other cover, you'll see that artistically, he's what just doesn't make it work. Because it's the same costume designs on this second artist, the 75th anniversary of Batman cover, because Batman's on the cover even though he's not in the book. And if you compare it to the Rocafort art, there's no comparison. This one blows it away, and it makes the costumes look realistic. And that's the key word, isn't it? Realistic. It makes them look plausible, and it makes them look pleasant to the eye. But inside the comic book, they just look stiff. There's very little motion in the comic book. It looks like pictures of people standing perfectly still. I still enjoyed it. It's a well-written story, and it's also easy to follow along. And if not just for that art, this would be the perfect comic book. I still recommend checking it out. The other big news this week, obviously, is that Comic-Con is happening in about 2 days from now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Comic-Con. The first thing that caught my eye is that there was an article online that was like the top 35 panels you should want to see when you're at Comic-Con. Do you know what those 35 panels are? They were all about movies and TV shows and video games and Q&As with popular actors. None of them had anything to do with comic books. There was one thing maybe with the Walking Dead creator Robert Kirkman, but it was more heavily advertised that it was Robert Kirkman and it was The Walking Dead than it was anything about the comic book side of it. However, I went through the program schedule, and I just went through Thursday, and if you're a comic book fan and if you're really there for comic books, there is a way to survive. There is a lot of things there for you to enjoy that are just about comic books. If you're not there to go scope out celebrities, if you're pissed off that there's like thousands of people there crowding the space and all they care about is the new Twilight movie or whatever, although I guess that series is over and that was a couple years ago that I went when that was happening. But if you don't care about that stuff and you're really looking for comic books, listen to some of these titles here. There's Marvel, Breaking into Comics the Marvel Way. These are the panels I'm reading from. And the description is, have a passion for the inner workings of the comic industry? Curious about breaking into the field as a writer-artist? Marvel professionals from every corner of the business give insider tips, advice, and first-hand accounts, etc., etc. I wish I could be there for that. And this one is for a friend of mine who already makes films, but I thought that he would find this interesting. It's called Comic Con Film School 101, Pre-Production and Screenwriting. Comic Con Film School is back for another 4-day nuts and bolts class on how to make a movie for very little money using available video technology and desktop post-production software. Again, I wish I was there for this, because honestly, when you make movie making, if you make creating something accessible to people, they're going to want to do it. And I would love to make a movie, and I would love it to be cost effective, and I would love to learn about that. And apparently there's going to be a panel like every day on this very subject. A couple other titles is Comic Book Law School 101. I'm sure that has something to do with copywriting and trademarks, which again I've had problems with. Had run in with some douchebags that are really overly protective of their work. Let's see. Editing Comics the Boom Way. Comic-Con How To, Advanced Digital Inking Techniques. There's a panel for previews. Marvel Comics has multiple panels. So does DC, Image Comics, Dark Horse. Comixology, the digital reading app, has a panel. There's an Adobe Photoshop panel. There's one called I Can't Write, I Can't Draw, but I Love Comics. That's tailor-made for me. There's another panel there called Batman in the 70s. It's in celebration of the 75th birthday of Batman. There's going to be some panelists there who were there at the time. Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, Len Wein, to name just a few. If you can't make that, there's several other Batman 75th anniversary panels. There's another one called Legend of the Dark Knights, happening later the same day. And they have programming going through all the night. If you're there and you're listening to this or you're about to go, I would say definitely look at all the programming. Figure out like the top 3 to 5 things that you really want to do, because each one is going to require time. And you're going to have to stand in line for those things for at least an hour, if not, well, definitely probably more. So look into those things, plan really well, and expect to be disappointed at least 1 or 2 of them. But also spend some time on the floor. Comic book booths and different companies have freebies out on the main floor everywhere at all times. Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse all give away free comic books throughout the day. Not to mention pins and posters and t-shirts and other things that you could be getting. So if you're walking around that floor, you're likely to run into some free swag. So plan it well, pack some snacks, and enjoy Comic-Con. Get the most out of that money that you spent over there. I think by this time next year, I'll be planning for my trip to Comic-Con, and I will definitely have podcasting coverage of all the cool stuff that's going on there. So this was the bonus episode for this week. I guess it's going to be podcast number 4. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out in my van. And until next time, keep on reading comics.